the inverted behavior. After hearing this, Ananda rose from his seat, prostrated himself before the Buddha, brought his two palms together, and knelt, saying, "World-honored one, if both seeing and hearing are beyond birth and death, why has the Buddha said that we have lost sight of our true nature and so acted in an inverted manner? Will you be compassionate enough to enlighten us and so wash off our defiling dust?" Thereupon the Buddha lowered his golden-hued arm, with the fingers pointing downward, and asked Ananda, "As you now see my hand, is it in a correct or inverted position?" Ananda replied, "All worldly men regard this as inverted, but I myself do not know which position is correct or inverted." The Buddha asked, "If they hold that it is inverted, which position do they consider to be upright?" Ananda replied, "If the Buddha holds up his hand pointing to the sky, it will be upright." The Buddha then held up his hand and said, "If worldly men so discriminate between an upright and inverted hand, they will in the same way differentiate between your body and the Buddha's pure and clean Dharmakaya, and will say that the Tathagata's body is completely enlightened, whereas yours is upside down. If you look closely into your body and the Buddha's, where is this so-called inversion?" After hearing this, Ananda and the assembly were bewildered and gazed fixedly at the Buddha without knowing whether their bodies and minds were really inverted. Delusion and enlightenment are of the same source. The Buddha was moved with compassion, and, out of pity for Ananda and the assembly, said in his voice as steady as the ocean tide, "Virtuous men, I have always declared that form and mind and all causes arising therefrom, all mental conditions and all causal phenomena are but manifestations of the mind. Your bodies and minds are just appearances within the wonderful, bright, and pure, profound mind. Why do you stray from the precious, bright, and subtle nature of fundamentally enlightened mind and so recognize delusion within enlightenment? Mind's dimness creates dull emptiness, and both, in the darkness, unite with it to become form. The mingling of form with false thinking causes the latter to take the shape of a body, stirred by accumulated causes within and drawn to externals without. Such inner disturbance is mistaken for the nature of mind. Hence the false view of a mind dwelling in the physical body, and the failure to realize that this body, as well as external mountains, rivers, space, and the great earth, are but phenomena within the wondrous, bright, true mind. Like an ignorant man who overlooks on the great ocean, but grasps at a floating bubble and regards it as a whole body of water in its immense expanse, you are doubly deluded amongst the deluded. This is exactly the same delusion as when I hold my hand down. And so the Tathagata says that you are the most pitiable people. Refuting the false perception to eliminate the fourth aggregate and reveal the non-existence of the seventh consciousness. Wiping out the unreal. The non-existence of discriminative perception. Ananda's wrong view. Ananda was moved to tears by the Buddha's compassion and profound teaching, brought his two palms together and said, "After hearing the Buddha's wonderful Dharma, I have realized that the wondrous bright mind is fundamentally perfect, so that I always dwell in my mind ground. But if my awakening has been due to the Buddha's preaching, I have really used my causal mind to hear it with reverence, thereby merely realizing that mind. I dare not pretend that it is the fundamental mind ground. Will you be compassionate enough to enlighten me so as to remove my remaining doubts, so that I can return to the supreme Tao?" Unreality of illusory causes. The Buddha said, "You are still using your clinging mind to listen to the Dharma. Since, however, this Dharma is also causal, you fail to realize the Dharma nature. This is like a man pointing a finger at the moon to show it to others who should follow the direction of the finger to look at the moon. If they look at the finger and mistake it for the moon, they lose sight of both the moon and the finger. Why? Because the bright moon is actually pointed at. They both lose sight of the finger and fail to distinguish between the states of brightness and darkness. Why? Because they mistake the finger for the bright moon and are not clear about brightness and darkness. Likewise, if you mistake your intellect, which hears my preaching voice, for your true mind, the latter's discerning nature should be independent of that differentiated voice. For instance, when a traveler spends the night at an inn, he does so for a time and then leaves, not staying there forever. As to the innkeeper, he has nowhere else to go, for he owns the inn. It is the same with your mind.